Teachers of Reddit, what is your "this student is so dumb it's scary" story? I don't usually wear glasses when I teach, except for one day, and it was subsequently a big deal among all my 5th graders. The next day at the start of class, I noticed a girl in the front row wearing glasses for the first time. Something seemed a little off, so I finally decided to chime in. "Emily, what's the deal with the glasses?" "These? I need them to see." "But they don't have any lenses." She appeared befuddled and said, "They don't?" before lifting her finger up to one of the eye frames and poking herself in the eye. "She's still poking. You can't change my mind." In 2nd grade, I definitely pretended I had eye problems because I wanted to be like Karen, Christy's little sister in the Babysitter's Club books, and wear giant pink glasses. My parents were not fooled. On a number of occasions, around 5 or 6, I have had to explain to students that you can still get pregnant even if you don't orgasm. Apparently, it's an old wives' tale in a bunch of cultures, and when I corrected them, they fought back. When I was student teaching, I had one who was just on the verge of passing, thanks to the incredible mercy of the primary teacher. All he needed to do was to turn in a worksheet that he finished in class. I know that he finished it because I watched him and helped him do it. All he had to do was give it to the teacher, but in his mind, that would mean that she had won. So he refused to turn it in. I left the school before the end of the semester, but I would bet money that he failed the class. Won? What's he playing? Himself. I work with kids 12 to 18, and the amount of middle schoolers who do all their work and pack it around in their bag without ever putting it in the homework box or handing it to the teacher is astounding. If anyone figures out why they do this, please help me. LOL. I had a friend like this. He's not stupid, but he's so stubborn you could punch him. He said it's out of fear of being wrong. Like the possibility of getting something wrong is so scary because that would signal they don't know what they're doing and are stupid. As if not knowing something on a test is a reflection of their own innate value, instead of a lack of preparation. That sounds like bad experiences with education. They put way too much emphasis on being good, and they completely gloss over the studying or the process of getting good. Failing and knowing where we failed is a super important and unavoidable part of getting better at something. One of my 10th graders said she saw a crime being committed, bike being stolen in neighbor's yard, and she wanted to call 911, but she didn't know the number. I remember hearing that, but with a quick Google search, I have learned that 911 was established in 1967. The point behind 911 was in the age of dial telephones. 9 and 1 were so far away from each other that it would be nigh on impossible to accidentally dial. Plus, it was easy muscle memory and fast. Once as far as the dial goes and 2 more times at the first click. I had a classmate put a thermometer into the middle of a Bunsen burner to see how hot the fire was. As the glass and mercury promptly exploded everywhere, I'm pretty sure I saw the teacher's soul leave her body. Never saw her look so horrified or pissed before. Classmate and I were 12. Why would they let 12-year-olds play with a Bunsen burner and mercury thermometers? I had chemistry in 6th grade. When I was 11, no mercury thermometers though. I had a little boy, 1st grade, who always got 14 as his answer to every problem no matter what. On the 2nd day of school, I sat down to do 3 plus 2 with him, using counters. We set out a pile of 3 and a pile of 2. I told him to count and watched in horror as he pushed the counters into a line, and then counted back and forth, recounting them until he got to 14. That was the biggest number he knew. He would have just kept going on. Oh no! At least this is while he's young, when it can be easily corrected. I like his thought process though. If I keep going, I'll find the answer eventually. Goes to show that if he didn't have the limit of 14, he would just keep going. Get him into something where that kind of mentality works. It's worse. He clearly doesn't know what counting is for. He is just touching things and saying words on command, like a dog performing a trick. Teaching laboratory skills. Ask the student to mix a tube by turning it upside down, gently a few times. Immediately turned it upside down without putting the cap on first. Student was a senior undergraduate, so maybe 21 years old. I swear this is sometimes how hypnosis works. You get someone to focus on something so intently, then ask them to do something, and they just go on autopilot without thinking about what they're doing. I like pointing this out to people with me when I'm at places like shopping malls, casinos, theme parks, etc. Anywhere that the entire layout is carefully crafted to manipulate the behavior of people. I like to have people sit down with me and encourage them to just watch how people aren't thinking for themselves. They just walk where the paths lead and get drawn to shiny things. It's truly incredible once you're able to more or less unplug yourself from your current environment and see the way it dictates other people's behavior. Not from when I was teaching, but a buddy's classmate. High school class was discussing the number of stars in the galaxy. My buddy jokingly says 20. Kid next to him, notably the sharpest kid I've known, goes, "Are you stupid? There's gotta be 100 of them. Maybe even 1,000. Serious as can be." Honestly not sure what's dumber, him thinking the guess of 20 was real, or him thinking that 1,000 might be too high. I tried counting once. There are definitely less than 1,000. Source: I'm in a city, can barely see Orion's belt from here. There are an average of 5,000 stars in the night sky if you are in a dark enough place. Kids asked me, "Are you from Detroit or some other city I forget?" I said neither. I moved here from Pennsylvania. One girl gasped and asked, "Do you have slaves there?" Not legally. Not a student, but a kid in my physics lab today called his group mates sources of error. That sounds like it could be accurate. Source: student. That's actually a half-clever diss. Human error is a valid source of error. I teach 5th grade. I had to explain to a student walking in line he would never walk in line correctly. Finally, after correcting him for the 1,000th time, he snapped, "What do you mean? What do you mean get in line? What's the line? Why do teachers always say that?" It never occurred to me he didn't understand after being in school for years. He was the best though, one of my favorites. He's definitely gonna take philosophy. He can't. I thought I would be teaching about plate tectonics today. Ended up having to do a lesson on why the earth isn't flat. Oh no. How old are your students? 4th grade. Okay, this isn't as bad as I was picturing. Still not great, but at least they're not in high school. There's still time to reach them. I'm not a teacher but a classmate of a kid who wanted to be a doctor who asked, when 14, if science was necessary to be a doctor, or if he could get by with religious studies. I hope he failed. He doesn't want to be a doctor. He wants to be a D&D cleric. I'd like to point out that religion checks are based on intelligence, which is a common dump stats for clerics, so it's even worse. I'm not a teacher, but I used to volunteer in my daughter's classrooms when they were in elementary school. One day while I was helping grade papers, it became quite apparent that one little girl had copied from the boy sitting next to her. Not only were the answers the same, she also had written his name on top of her paper. History gym teacher was telling us about catching people cheating. He said he was always for people who thought up creative ways. On the other hand, when you get a paper that's the same as another, word for word, including one particular misspelled word, with a question mark spelling written above it, well, similarly, I had the students copy my teacher's edition text when I had a substitute. They copied every answer to their assignment word for word, including answers may vary. Check student responses. This happened in high school maths. Let's call him John. Teacher: "So John, how do you find an average?" John: "Kilometer." The pain in the teacher's eyes was immeasurable. I don't get it. Kid clearly had autism, and rather low functioning at that. I was his key worker and could only get him to respond to textures or music. He was only 2, but wouldn't answer when called or would just sit vacant in the room while all the other children got up and moved into the other room. Just not there in the here and now unless, like I said, I played a song and he'd come to life. He'd sit at the table, vacant, unless I put his hands into something that felt different, water, sand, etc. I told my boss that I thought he had autism, and she replied, "Autism is nonsense, he's just lazy." So I continued teaching him as though he was autistic, because that's the only way I could get him to learn. Fast forward and yep, he's autistic. I mean, that's less the kid and more your boss being scarily stupid. What became of the child? As I was in my last days there, the mother came to me tearful and said he's been diagnosed autistic. I don't remember if I'd suggested it, but I know I'd wanted to. I remember bits of conversations which suggest I did at least hint. I told her it was a gift if you work with it, and gave her a hug. After that, I don't know what happened to Chris. Told to me by a friend, written in his words. The other day I had a student bite into a bar of deodorant. Just jumped right into it, as if it were a coconut and palm tree scented ice cream bar. This after making like he was going to lick it, and accidentally getting the taste of the deodorant and his own residual pit sweat. Half a second later, he just went whole hog on it and took a chunk out of it, then spat it out. I didn't know whether to call poison control or the principal. In my design class, I had this girl who had placed a garage beside the house, but couldn't, for the life of God, figure out why her 90cm by 200cm door was not appropriate for a car to enter through. Same girl planned a same space for children in a library. Said space was only 1.5 meters high, and no matter what the teacher said, she kept going back to, "But this space is for children. They are not tall. But they will suffocate. But it is a space for children." I was a former college recruiter who used to set up a booth at low-income schools to help guide first-generation students into college. Had a high school girl come up to me and tell me she wants to be a gynecologist. So I start talking about which schools have good pre-med programs, the kind of classes she would need to take, broaching the idea of med school. She says, "Hold up, a gynecologist is a doctor?" I say, "Yes." She says, "Well, I do not want to go to medical school. I just want a job where I can look at vaginas all day." We ended up talking about possibly cosmetology school or esthetician school. Also, she was not kidding. I got many dumb questions like this. When you don't know, you don't know. I think she just wants to be a lesbian. This reminds me of when I was in kindergarten. The teacher told us to write what we want our future profession to be, and why. I wrote down that I want to be a doctor because I like looking at people's organs. She made me change it to me wanting to help people or something, but organs are cool. Heard a first grade girl crying. Turned around to see a girl with her shoe off barefoot, hiding something in one hand with a pair of scissors in the other. I asked her what the matter was. She told me that she had half of a sock and opened her hand to clearly show a poorly cut up sock. I asked her why she cut her sock off, and she said she didn't realize it would cut the sock. Great thinking, kiddo. I taught a freshman English class, and an 18-year-old wrote a persuasive essay arguing that homicide is a good way to keep population down. Were they surprisingly purple and had a fancy glove? For some reason, I thought of Willy Wonka before Thanos. When I was a professor, I had a student submit a paper she clearly hadn't written. I called her out on it, and she complained by email to me and CC'd the dean of the school. Her argument was that it was hers because she had paid her own money to have it written. Had a test on the 3 states of matter. Students' response: first name liquid, last name gas. That's what we called her the remainder of the year. Not a teacher myself, but my teacher told us this story. I should mention that I live in Israel, and often the lessons are in Hebrew. So we had an essay we had to write in English about people who influenced on our lives. And there was one student who used a lot of Google Translate. He probably just ran the whole text through it. Our teacher's last name is Ben Abraham. And yes, he ran it through the translator, so he called her Son of Abraham. Not a teacher, but a classmate of mine. We were in 8th grade whole geography class. Teacher: what language do people in Mexico speak? He was asking sarcastically. Student: Mexican. Teacher nearly quit right then and there. Side note, the student grew up and was arrested for being a pedophile to his own daughter. He was so dumb it was scary. Small hick towns or something. I had an 8th grade girl worry that if she can't find a boyfriend, she will have to find one on The Bachelor. She would have been 16 within those 2 years. She later asked me to tell her crush in another class that she loved him deeply. Nope. We have been watching Excalibur the movie in class, high school, for 2 consecutive days. And with about 20 minutes left in the movie, a girl raises her hand and dead-ass asks, "Wait, is Excalibur the sword?" And most of the class slow turned to look at this girl. Student got access to my master class thesis and lifted a section out verbatim and turned it into me as their own work. That must have been interesting to read. I swear I've heard this before. Cut the internet by kinking the cable like a hose. With solid core CAT5 it might work. Kink it tight enough and you'll break the wires. Or fiber. I work in IT at schools, so not a teacher. My favorite one is kids bringing their laptop in complaining the internet doesn't work. Turns out, they have all but ripped off the top cover and it is held together with just a cable. I show him all the torn cables and ask if they could guess why their laptop doesn't work properly. This has been multiple kids between multiple schools. I had an 8th grader today who was surprised to learn that when he calls his teachers Mr. and Mrs., that is their last name, not their first name. I go by Mr. Good. He thought my first name was good. The name is good. In a rural school district in TX, a thick electric cable spans over the rec area and 50 middle schoolers, lunchtime, one of whom decides to throw rocks at the squirrels that use said cable as a bridge. Student hits poor squirrel minding its own business that then falls several feet directly onto student's face. Unharmed, poor Mr. Squirrel scampers off and 6th grader gets a scratched up face and rabies shots. On mobile, sorry for format. My wife is a teacher and she said some kids literally don't know how to rip a piece of tape off a roll. They just keep pulling it until it gets all twisted and stuck on itself and ask for help. My friend thought it's impossible for the Egyptians to build the pyramids with their technology. She instead came to the conclusion they built them from the top down and saw no flaw in her answer. That second sentence didn't turn out the way I thought it was heading. I thought you were going to say that your friend believes ancient aliens built the pyramids, which is still stupid but a very popular form of stupidity. Gonna get buried, but had a kid in high school where they were doing a lab with nail polish and the teacher had pet fish. This man dumps the polish in the fish tank and the teacher flipped. He got suspended for 2 days. By the way, he was a sophomore in high school.